I want to start with a fun fact, which I didn't plan to start with a fun fact today, but I learned yesterday. Somebody said that the Hyatt had the largest lobby in the world. Did anybody know that?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, so it's not going to be so much fun. But anyway, for those of you that don't know it, it's the largest lobby in the world with 17 stories and 42,000 cubic feet. So that's a nice story to tell that you were at the hotel with the largest lobby in the world. So anyway, back to Agile here. I would like to start by gauging the audience a little bit. Who's been involved in an Agile project? Raise hands. So almost everyone here. Great. Who's been involved in an Agile project as a Scrum Master? Okay, great. Now, who's been in an Agile project that really turned into like a waterfall project? Kind of like you said, let's do Agile. They're like, kind of like, got through the flow and got into Agile. Okay, perfect. Great. So today, the purpose of the presentation is to inspire you to use Agile as best as possible. We're going to go over a few of the principles, some of the pitfalls, and also Kathy, she's going to later present us a great use case at Sprint of how they're using Appian and Agile. Some of you may have seen this picture before. It's a great analogy of how to deliver Agile projects. In all the methodologies, granted like waterfall, right? You start with delivering the first piece, but the customer is not happy yet. Second iteration, you expand that, you're not getting the value yet. Third, and maybe you get the value until the fourth iteration. Yeah, we got a car, we're moving faster. The principle of Agile, and you've experienced that, and some of those of you who have done Agile projects, is that you start delivering value fast. First iteration, you're moving faster. We call this a scooter analogy. The first iteration, you're moving faster. Second iteration, you added some functionality to navigate better. Then you expand it, you grow, you expand your components, you get the value. So the customer is happy since iteration 1, and that is the core principle. In fact, I want to tell a story. Actually, some of my customers are here, but we've used that scooter analogy so much that actually one of my customers actually one day came up with a scooter, a model of a scooter, and so like, this is our scooter. We're going to build this the first iteration. So it was nice because we were able to align when getting and designing and getting all the requirements for Sprint 0. We were getting back to the scooter. Is that a scooter or is that the Ferrari at the end? So using analogies, sometimes people get a lot of value by analyzing and comparing to like, okay, is this right? Are we going in the right direction? So using analogies, and this scooter analogy is great. I didn't create this. You can look it up online too. I'm going to go back to basics. And what is Agile? Really, Agile is really not that a methodology, but it's just more an umbrella that describes a list of methodologies. It encompasses some values and principles. Then you define a methodology. And some of you that have done Agile, Scrum is probably one of the most popular ones, but there's Kanban, XP, Scaled Agile, I think Sprint uses. And then all those methodologies come with multiple practices. You name it, you define it, right? Your contract with the team, daily stand-up, unit testing, release planning, automated builds, integrated development, continuous integration. Agile Manifesto. Has anybody seen this before? The Agile Manifesto? Yeah, it's actually, if you go to agilemanifesto.org, you'll find it there. So, I'm just recapping on some of the practices and some of the best ways to adopt Agile. Individuals and interactions versus processes and tools. What does that mean? In many projects, we want to follow all these processes, this traceability matrix. You have to comply with this, upload your requirements to this tool, just maybe a version system before you even start doing something. But we have to focus on the people and interacting. Like, are we talking to the right people? Are we getting exactly what we want to hear? And most importantly, are we asking the right questions to collect those requirements? Working software versus comprehensive documentation. This doesn't mean that Agile, I know that many people say like, oh, Agile, you don't get any documentation. That is not true. You plan for the documentation, but you try to get to deliver the software before you start delivering your documentation. Many times we end up I mean, in the past, I've also been part of many years ago of projects where you spend probably 50% of your time documenting, and then the other 50%, like it's, I don't want to call it a waste of time, but you need to focus your resources where they need to be at, right? Where, especially when you start talking about your stakeholders and your executives, right? What is providing the value? Is that document that's going to go on the shelf going to provide you the value, or is that software, that application is going to give you the ROI faster? Customer collaboration versus contract negotiation. This is an important one, because sometimes we focus too much, especially with partner teams or others that we actually get into contracts, right? So it's like, okay, what are you delivering to me? You need to define your scope. You need to define this, and then you go over and over, and you could be negotiating contract for months. What Agile suggests, and this is a difficult concept to understand for many procurement organizations. Then they say, like, okay, what are you giving me? Tell me exactly. I need to be in the contract. I need to relate back to the contract. What Agile does, and again, it's this hard concept, is you didn't really define your high-level scope at the beginning. You really don't know exactly how you're going to get there. You define what your scope is going to be during the project, right? So it is more of that chicken and egg, right? So I don't want to know. I don't know exactly what I'm going to get, but I know I'm going to get it, right? So, and it's a lot of collaboration. And once you try it out, it's a successful methodology, right? So this customer collaboration is very, very, very important over the contract negotiation. Responding to change versus following a plan. How many of you have worked with Microsoft project? You lay out a project plan for 2 years, and then you start falling behind, and you're like, oh no, now we need to be design and implementation, and then we should be in testing by now. So let's follow the plan, and we should start testing. But what are we testing if we haven't finished yet? So respond to change. What happens if maybe a requirement changes, and you need to adapt that change to your cycle. So that's the magic of sprint, that you fail fast, you adopt the change faster. So the items on the right are still valuable, but we try to focus our energy on the items on the left. Agile puts the business in the driver's seat. So this doesn't mean that the business is going to take the car, run away, and crash. Right. This means that the business, we work closely with the business. They define where they're going to go. Maybe they're at the driver's seat, but the co-pilots and the navigation, we're going to provide the IT teams, implementation teams are going to provide the navigation to get from point A to point B. But they are going to be the ones that are going to get the value from transporting themselves there. I'm going to go over some of the best practices in Agile. Some of you may be already familiar with that. For those of you that don't, welcome to take notes. Be open to change. Welcome changes. It's hard to say, you know what, that screen that you just built, that's not what I wanted. It's like, oh, but we just spent 2 weeks working on it. Well, you should be happy that you're getting that feedback 2 weeks after you started working on that. Otherwise, you're going to be building on top of that, on top of that, on top of that. And then the changes, and as many of you know, the more you wait to make a change, the more expensive it's going to be. So be open to change, get the changes fast so that you can react and correct the path. Deliver working software frequently. So frequency. So this is important. Your sprints have to be of certain length that you can actually show the value. Even if it's just a simple screen, even if it's just like a simple button. Sometimes that button is not going to be right, and the business is not going to want it that way. So delivering software, working software quickly and frequently is one of the principles. Collaborate daily. You have your daily stand-up, and that goes. The collaboration goes beyond that. Always talk to the business. Always talk to the implementation team. And the collaboration is not only talking, but also maybe using an agile management tool like Jira, version 1 Rally. Make sure that you collaborate daily. This is a very important one. Build projects are motivated individuals. How many of you start on an Agile project, really not knowing what role you're playing, and then the team is just running, and they're running Agile, but they really don't know where they're getting. So explaining the roles, explaining the responsibilities, and making the teams accountable for their work. And sometimes it's just as easy as explaining the overall vision of the project that is going to create motivated individuals. Roles are really important. And when I work with my teams, I tell them there's no hierarchy here. That we all play a different role. Sometimes the role comes with more authority than other roles, but that's a role. And everybody's accountable for that. And when you explain and you level set expectations, not only with the delivery team, but also with the business needs to know how they're going to run Agile. So take the time to spend 1 or 2 days talking to the business, explaining them how they're going to be working and what the benefits are for working on this with this methodology. Of course, we hear this all the time. Embrace simplicity. How many of us do really embrace it? So we know what simplicity is, but how many of us embrace it and say, yeah, we can do it this way, but that's too simple. Yep, but it works. That's what we're trying to get at. Sustainable development at a constant pace. Do you have any runners in the audience? Yeah? Okay, great. So you know that when you're running, for those of you that don't run, I'm not a runner, but I've done that in the past. You know that once you start running, the hardest part is the warm up. Like you start running and you're like still cold, but when you're running long distances, you realize that by your maybe you're 10 miles, you don't even know that you're running. You kind of get in that sustainable pace and constant pace. But if you run too fast, you're gonna burn yourself out, right? So that is sustainable development at a constant pace. Your project might be 3 or 4 sprints, but it could be 10, 20 sprints. So you want to make sure that your teams are working at a sustainable pace, and by adapting best practices and correcting the path, not only for scope perspective, but also is your team working reasonable hours, right? Those are important factors to get to sustainable development. Never forget about good design. Agile doesn't mean that you're going to build it quick and dirty. Agile means that you're going to be building a great piece of code that maybe it's going to be very small, but it's going to be production quality. Maybe you're not going to deploy it to production, but it's going to be the production quality code that will be designed, unit tested, peer reviewed, tested by the testing team, and it's going to be ready. And this piece of code unit is going to be ready to be put into production at some point. So never forget technical design. So don't just do it fast, but build it well. Self-organizing teams. Establish a contract with your team. As simple as, what are the core hours? Many of us work in different time zones. What are the core hours? Does it work like this person kind of do stand-up at 9 a.m. because it's 6 a.m. West Coast? So what are the core hours? What are the business? What is the team comfortable with? Because if you tell them, no, you have to wake up at 6 a.m. for the stand-up, you're not going to have a motivated individual. So establish a contract, self-organize yourself, give that accountability to your development team. Tell them what do you want to do? How do you think the things are going to work, right? So that's why there's no concept of a boss in Agile. Make adjustments, critical piece. What went well, what went wrong, but actually implement that. Track the changes. Track what are the things that didn't work last sprint. This relates to retrospectives, right? And there's so many techniques for retrospectives. I encourage you to look up retrospective techniques, because the typical one is what went well, what can be done better, what should we start doing. Come up with techniques to really extract what people are thinking. And sometimes the retrospectives have to be done anonymously because people are afraid to talk, which should be eliminated. But maybe that's a way to actually get the real feedback from developers. Like, I don't like my product owner. He's not delivering what I need to do. But I'm afraid of saying that in front of the product owner. So make it anonymous, maybe. But you need to extract that from your team. Make sure that you know what they're thinking and what are the hurdles they're going through. Now, all of these principles, what happens in reality? I'm going to go over some of the pitfalls that are very common when implementing or starting, or not even just beginners, Agilists, but also it happens depending on the environment we're working on. I'm familiar with Agile. I was saying, many companies are trying to adopt Agile right now. And then just like, you know what, sounds cool. Well, let's run this as an Agile project. What does that mean? Oh, but we're going to be Agile, right? We're going to run sprints. Okay, but what is that? What does that mean? Like, explain, get your team trained on Agile. Like, it doesn't really take too much time or effort to get a team the basics of Agile. So it's very important that not only the team, but also the business is familiar with Agile. An experienced product owner. Product owner is, in my opinion, one of the most important roles. Everybody's important in the team, but the product owner has to be chosen with a lot of thought in place, because the product owner has to be a person that not only knows the business and knows the technology. It doesn't have to be an expert in the technology, but they need to know the basics. They're working with Appian. I recommend product owners should know Appian. Like, what tool are they using? What technology they're going to be using? So they need to know that. But most importantly, they are going to be able to make decisions, and they're going to be able to drive. Most times, the product owner is from the business, so they're going to be in the driver's seat. The team has to come to that single person to ask for questions and get answers. And not only, maybe the product owner doesn't know everything. I mean, who knows everything in the business? But that person is going to be able to collect information from multiple sources to be able to make a decision. So the team doesn't have to be running around trying to chase different members of the business trying to get answers. I want to relate to the product owner. Maybe have meetings with SMEs are valid, but the product owner is a key role in your Agile implementation. Everything made critical. The problems defining MVP. We need this. How about this? We need it too. And how about that? I think we need that too. Really? Embrace simplicity. You don't need everything. You don't need everything. Sometimes when you embrace simplicity, you probably realize that you were not in the right path. So you actually have to change direction. So that's why you want to keep it simple, because if it fails, you just have to correct a few things, not everything. Difficulty managing the release plan. You have a huge backlog. How do you put every piece or how many sprints do you put in your release plan? It is important that you actually go over the priorities. I think that's the key here. Ignoring the challenges of Agile Fall. This is probably a great segue for Kathy to speak here. Sometimes some processes are waterfall, and they've been working like that, and sometimes they cannot be, not everything can be done Agile. There's some processes that need to continue as waterfall. But you can just ignore and try to run Agile and mix with waterfall if you don't know exactly what you're running into. So step back, identify the pieces of the puzzle that you can run Agile, and the ones that are not, then identify the challenges that you're going to run into so that you can run your Agile project successfully. So I'm going to recap the part of my presentation and then turn it to Kathy. You have to follow your methodology. You define how you want to run your project, but you have to align to principles. The principles that we just showed, and there's more, but those are the most important ones that we selected. Define your roles clearly. Who's going to do what, and make people accountable. Make them responsible for their actions. I think that's a key point. Welcome changes with structure. That means that requirements changes are going to happen, but how do you adapt them? So it doesn't mean that every iteration you're just going to be running like crazy trying to adapt to feedback from the customer or from the business. Make sure that they are well structured. You have user stories. You use an Agile management tool so that you can prioritize and move your backlog. Take retrospective seriously. As I said, don't ignore what the team is feeling is going wrong. Correct that so that you can get the most efficiency out of them. So with this, I'm going to turn it to Kathy.
Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is walk off of here, because clicking and that step will lead to a different level of entertainment here today. So I'm going to talk about both Appian and Agile at Sprint. So where we've ended up and how we've made the two work. So first I'm going to talk a little bit about Agile. So we had a handful of teams in 2012, and it was actually started out of our enterprise architecture organization. with a vision towards what it is that we wanted to start doing Agile development. It started in 12, so it's roughly a 5-year journey. In 2013, we got to 8 teams, and then 12. And ultimately, we exited 2016 with 15 teams. And I believe we've added another 3 to 5 just in the time that we started 17 into this calendar year. We've started moving from hours to features. So those of you that are doing waterfall, everything's estimated in hours. We look at it so now we've started being able to get sophisticated enough where we can talk about feature development and resource assignment to those features. You'll notice that our number of features delivered dropped from 15 to 16. And that was because we were able to introduce a great deal more complexity into our Agile development than we'd ever had before. So fewer features, but infinitely more robust and more scalable in terms of the complexity we attacked. So what are you doing in 17? We're adding more feature teams. Check. Got that one checked off. We're working with our third parties. That's our, so I'm the Water Scrum Fall advocate. And one of the reasons is at Sprint we have a lot of third parties, and the third parties aren't particularly interested in Agile. It's undefined. They don't know how to bill us for it. They don't understand how to measure the quality of it. It doesn't work well from a third-party perspective. They're used to very structured contracts and SOWs, and they struggle with that. Or you end up with what we call a bucket of sweat contracts. You know what, we're going to show up, we're going to bring this many people, they're going to have this many hours, this is how much we're going to charge you, and you'll get work for that. Thank you very much. That is real effective. I like that contract negotiation. We're moving from Scrum and Agile teams to release trains. So that's how we've been able to accommodate waterfall in the release train space. We're adopting and both training our business personnel, so we've got more focus on that. So we didn't just turn our business folks loose and make them Ubers and say have a nice day and learn how to prioritize things. We actually train them, but we're having to work with our business teams more holistically. And some of that's just getting them to adopt the culture and trust the process, which I know IT people saying, just trust me, it'll be fine, it'll work out great, you'll really like it when we're done. Just trust me. Doesn't seem to resonate well. I don't know about you, it must be something about my face, I must not look honest enough. So what we had to start working through is getting the business teams to understand you will get a better result if you adopt Agile, and here's why, right? So there's a lot of training going in there. And then the last piece is what we call continuous integration, and this is where Appian has really helped us out because we can avoid application to application integration because we're using Appian to glue the applications together through process construction. And so that's where we've really been able to cut our costs and our complexity by being able to leverage our existing infrastructure, exploit our middleware, and then use a tool like Appian that's low code and very process-centric to provide that glue and handle all the handoffs. So that's our mission for 17. We use the Scaled Agile Framework. You can look it up in Google and it'll have a picture that looks just like that. So in there you construct portfolios, programs, and you have teams. So we've got a portfolio backlog. So what is it out of our sales portfolio, marketing portfolio we plan to deliver? We have programs, unlimited, right? Unlimited freedom. Some of our price plan constructs, those become programs and how we intend to offer that. And then we have the team backlog that says we may have 7 or 8 application teams that need to deliver that, and they each have their own individual backlog to mix in. So that's our mechanism of Scaled Agile Framework. So now, right, how does that work? So the things that we have in ours, and I'm going to actually get to Water Scrum Fall here in just a minute. So what we ask our business owners to do is prioritize the investment. So don't just give us a bucket of money and say I have 1,000 things I want to do for that bucket of money and I've justified it. Get a business case. The business owner has to start evaluating every single feature that's groomed and what is its value proposition. That is a hard process because business owners will get very attached to, yeah, but my life would just be so good if I had this report and it told me this and the graph had this kind of stuff on it. I would really like that. Like, well, that's nice, but what are you going to do with it? What's the investment? They hate that, right? So we have had to actually talk about size and investment, and then get them to a point where they can understand, is that report really, I know it would make you sleep better at night, but is it really worth this much money, right? And then you have to build a roadmap. You will not get your business teams that are used to doing everything in a waterfall manner, that they get a big bang release with 1,000 requirements in it, to move into this framework without seeing that somehow those 1,000 requirements are going to get delivered across time. If you don't do that, in my opinion, at least we were not successful, right? We had to find really small things to do agile development methods with that were really small in the nature of what they were, and then they didn't have to worry about a roadmap or delaying features or delaying gratification. And then you have to keep the roadmap evergreen. Something changes, you got to go back in and change your roadmap. So they will change, priorities will change. You're looking at something over a 52-week period. I don't know if anybody's managed to keep 52 weeks static and there's been no requirement changes and no prioritization changes, I'll be incredibly surprised in any industry, right? It just doesn't work that way. Something changes all the time. You got to understand your dependencies. So we built our method of dealing with waterfall and third parties from understanding the dependency chain, and recognized we weren't going to be able to get our agile at scale if we didn't understand where the dependencies were and then manage the dependencies. You've got to stop and start work, and you have to understand the work you're stopping and starting. And you'll understand that when I show you the intersection of how we've done it. And then you've got to identify and manage risks. So there may be a funding gap, right? So things happen. Somebody gets attached to an idea, they come to IT, they get people all spun up on it. At some point, we ask, where's the money? And they say, don't worry about that. It's coming. It'll be here. Just keep going, right? Can't do that, right? So you got to manage those risks. You got to understand, and you got to understand when you're either overfunded or underfunded to deliver the value of the program. And then, as part of understanding that, you got to get people to accept it, right? And it's not good enough just to say, hey, this is a risk. Does everybody understand that? You got to get people to own it and manage the risk out. And if they don't, right, I ask you to do something in 3 months that should take 9. We're probably not going to get it all done. Are you willing to deliver a third of a product, right? You got to get people to understand and own that. Sometimes they say yes, and then you deploy it in production and they ask why it doesn't work, okay? I thought we had that conversation 3 months ago. So those are things that you got to own it. You got to have people not just owning them and understanding them, you got to identify them. So here's how we dealt with dependencies on a feature that were being delivered via waterfall methods. So walk over here, run this, okay. So you got your investment, right? We have our epics. The individual, the manager that developed all this, so I'm not very picture-oriented, I'm very word-oriented, so I had to have somebody do all the slagware for me. So his particular epic was Product Awesome, right? It should be the coolest thing ever. And then we had another epic around mobile care. I can do all kinds of things from my phone. Mobile payments, and then the best invoice ever. So people would feel really good about the bill they were paying. And then from that, go through a grooming process in Agile, and you get your features lifted out of that. And in the midst of that, and I'll point back to the most awesome invoice ever, our most awesome invoicing is done through a third party. The third party is absolutely waterfall. That's how they understand scope, that's how they test, that it is waterfall. So what we do is we have a process that we call our partners process. And so what we did was we developed that feature for that invoice. We recognized the dependency, and we came into a resource assignment process and said we need resource and capacity from our billing partner to actually deliver the most awesome invoice ever. And we got those resources assigned here. Then we said, okay, those resources, right, have to do analysis, design, development, and test. Very traditional, structured, hard handoffs, specific documents, deliverables. And that happens to line up with this planning, this particular planning cycle, right, that's going to be delivering these features in this time frame, in these work cycles. So that's how we married the two together. And you have one project, program manager. They're going to have to work across multiple Scrum teams because get the most awesome invoice ever for the most awesome product ever, right? That all has to eventually get delivered at the same time. And so that's actually how we worked it through, and we did it through resource assignment. So a little tricky about how you make all that work. So you have to get waterfall teams started. They're not going to get all the requirements, do iterative design and prototyping. That's not how they operate, right? So you have to support the fact that those teams need requirements, analysis. They need to go through the stage gates. You need to build a phase for the Scrum team here that lines up, right? You can't not do that, right? You got to understand where they are. Then you pull in the sprints by priority and you scope them. And then you have to actually do the design, development, and test inside the sprint for whatever feature you're delivering there. And then at the point in time where your waterfall development is completed, you have to do the integration to hit end to end. So, but you have to assign resources from your Agile teams to this effort to make sure that your analysis and design is syncing up. Otherwise, you end up with a disaggregated, you ran in parallel, but you actually never came together.
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
So when you talk about resource assignments, are you talking about the fact that you, Sprint, picks certain resources from the Scrum teams and assigns them to work with the partner so they can deliver at the same time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So you have to assign both, but you have to assign resources from both camps, right? So the Scrum teams, they're also building out features, right? But they have to support that analysis and design and the iterative process. And they also have to recognize when they're changing things that impact that waterfall team, right? So there has to be a blend there. They have to understand both sides of it. And then you also have to assign from the waterfall team, right? Those guys have to actually be in place and engaged. They may not be in the stand-up calls every day. They may not be part of the sprints, but they still have to be engaged and their resources have to be designed. And they have to have a feedback and check loop to make sure they're delivering the right thing.
But you are external to these partners. So how can you require them to assign resources for that? Is that just
Our partner relationships,
they know and understand?
they know and understand that they have to commit resources to these initiatives, right? Just because it's Agile doesn't mean, to them, it's just a project to create the most awesome invoice ever, right? And they just got scope to achieve that. That's what they're supposed to be building. Okay, now, in order for this to work, all the teams have to have the entire vision. So you gotta confess up front, you gotta say what you're trying to do, you gotta make sure everybody has the same vision and that we're delivering the most awesome product that's gonna deliver the most awesome invoice, and here's what we're all doing, right? You gotta roadmap it. You gotta see how your schedule lays out, you gotta understand what features are being delivered, you have to understand what features are coming first, and both development organizations have to understand that complete picture. You gotta talk about dependencies. If you're not here, I can't get there, right? And everybody's gotta understand how that works. And then you gotta talk about risks, right? So if the waterfall team says, by the way, when you wanna come in, I am already at capacity, so I can't assign resources to your initiative, and you gotta go back and replan the whole thing. That's just the nature of the beast. You'll have to pull some other features up on your Agile team, so maybe you develop the most awesome product ever and you launch that in front of having the most awesome invoice ever, because the current invoice will actually build sufficiently for it. But you gotta manage all that and you gotta understand it. So you gotta plan, and you gotta review, and you gotta review with everybody. You can't decide to just do it your way, right? And that's why we put program and project managers in place that are totally responsible for the entire initiative and understand that those reviews have to occur. You got to understand all the capacities and the dependencies and the activities and make sure there's alignment there. And then you got the value you get right is you are minimizing the time frame to analyze the scope because your Agile teams need to move fast through that scope. So it's easier to define the scope for your waterfall teams because the Agile teams are already ahead of them and they're already doing that work. And then you can't be jerking it around. So let's be brutally honest and frank, right? If you're going to start on one of these and it's big, you got to say, guys, we can't be changing this. The opportunity to change stopped the day we assigned resources. You certainly can refine the scope. You can evolve it over time. You can make sure that you're doing high-value features. But you cannot decide, oh, we're going to do it this way. Oh, geez, that looks really hard. OK, so how about if we do it this way? Well, you just made this over here harder. Well, OK, so how about if we do it this way? And you'll just spin, right? So we had one of those where we had a spin on requirements going on infinitely, right? And so we basically said, look, we're going to do 80% of it now. All this other stuff we're going to deploy, and actually Jan was there with me. We sent the developers off to write code. So then when there was spin on changing stuff, I said, you know what, we already started coding that. You can't change that. You're going to have to live with it. Because we already started writing that code. It wasn't exactly true, but it worked, right? We're not throwing that away. So we already started writing code. Don't do that. If you've got experienced Agile teams, they'll go faster. So water Scrum Fall works a whole lot better if the Scrum part knows what they're doing. Because the waterfall does. They've been doing it for several decades. They got to know. OK, so about Appian. You don't have to start small. You can start big. You can pick a big thing and be successful. You just have to plan for it. You have to understand what you're doing. And you have to be able to bite it off in pieces. You got to plan. Plan, 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 plan. If you hear nothing else today, plan. Agree on your deliverables, right? So if your waterfall team says, I want to understand the 157 requirements that I'm delivering in this roadmap, give them the 157 requirements that are delivered in the roadmap, if that's what they need. Make sure they have the collateral they need to move forward. Don't underestimate integration. Do not underestimate it. So if you're going to use Appian, which is what we're doing, to avoid application-to-application integration, don't assume that you eliminated all integration. That isn't what I said. What I said was, you're still going to do integration. You're moving it into one place, and you're able to use common services and common APIs. But don't underestimate it, because it's hard. It isn't any easier in Appian than it is in anything else. It's still hard. And that's it. Thank you very much.
So
I think we've got
I believe we have a few minutes for questions.
just a couple minutes.
So anyone?
Sure.
So the question we were talking about so my question's around the example that you were just mentioning right now where we want to change something here. My question to you is, well, why didn't that fall into the log? And then that would then become the next iteration. I mean, did you not capture that somehow?
I probably didn't clarify my change. A simple requirements change or the addition or movement of something. We had some, when you're doing water Scrum Fall, your development teams can get into a debate about what should be waterfall and what should be Scrum and what applications should be used, and they'll change your approach. And that's what you have to cut off.
Okay. So that you then related that to effort.
Right.
Okay, and then you prioritize back the effort and say, oh, well, wait a minute, this is just out of,
we're
not going to be able to do it with this type of effort in terms of prioritization. And that's how that got taken off. Okay.
That's how we got
I
it
just
taken
wanted
off.
to clarify that. Thank you.
No, we take it off if it isn't worth it. I think I got time for one more question if there is one.
Great. You mentioned the water Scrum Fall methodology, and you talked about this value, scope, and sizing effort, right? And then you emphasized the importance of planning, but you also said minimize time to analyze scope. So how long do you spend in that initial phase, that sprint zero, as we call it, for that planning?
Well, our intent, and Water Scrum Fall actually has kind of their own analysis life, right? So we we try to keep that constrained to about a 30-day process where we've scoped it in. Some of the initiatives will bleed over, but what we try and do is keep that within 30 days, because actually, by the time you're through the 30-day process, you've generated more scope than you can possibly deliver in your initial set of features anyways, and so you're kind of spinning people through a lot of wasted effort. So we usually try and keep that shorter, and that's not a traditional waterfall time frame.
Gotcha. Great, makes sense. Thank you.
Okay? All right. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.